Questions about a killer, a man sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, but allowed to have unsupervised family visits. And one of those visits, his wife ends up dead.
Your reporter Madison Keevy has the woman's family's plea to the prison make changes and give them answers.
Love their grandchildren more than anything. And that's what hurts the most, is because we got some that's about 3 years old. They don't know, what's going on. It's hard to explain that to them.
Stephanie Brinson wore many hats.
Immediately, the very first thing I thought of was 4 life sentences. Why is he allowed to do anything? I'm just saying. I don't know. We'll talk about it, but 4 life sentences, I'm going to just be honest. I don't give a damn how good of a prisoner you've been during your time in custody. I know that sounds a little wild, but I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not saying that, but 4 murders is kind of crazy. 4 murders, at the same time, they all occurred at the same time. It wasn't like he killed somebody every 2 years. I'm not saying that would make it better, but you can have a felony conviction for a DUI. Does the DUI guy, girl, not deserve love? Probably so. But if you got 4 murders, I probably think is how you going to have a boom boom room in jail. If you wanted to, you couldn't, because the fun parts are behind bars. You can at least go to Walgreens and get something a lot. Yeah. Hey, I agree. I'm just not a fan of conjugal visits. It's prison. You're there for a reason. Okay. You can better yourself, but I don't think that the government should be supporting your cheek clappers time. The government don't support my cheek clappers time, so why should the government support your cheek clappers time? And I ain't commit no crimes. Yo, what's going on? I just wanted to. I thought that's a better way than just having a countdown while I make sure everything is squared away. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. We're going to keep this video relatively short. That preview I just showed, I'll link that in the description, or I'll put it in the pinned comment after we get out of here. But I thought that was a much better way to lead into, instead of just having a countdown or just waiting while I get stuff done. I was like, I'm going to just do a preview. Bro, I'm not about to play fetch with you. Just come on, bro. No, here, I'll be done in a minute. Go. Don't bring it back. Go. This dog ridiculous. This dog is ridiculous. So, I thought it was a much better way to start the live stream. As always, I'm Marcus here. We do attorney reactions to current events. We're going to dive into, can Beau Brindley effectively represent Tiffany Henyard and Kamal Woods? We're going to dive into that story. Before, I got a quick story about a mayor in Illinois. It's some financial stuff. It seems vaguely familiar to what we have been talking about. So let's go ahead and watch this video real quick. We'll talk about that. Then we'll dive into the main story for the night, because I don't want to keep y'all long because, I haven't eaten dinner yet and I need to get something to eat. Let's go ahead and jump in to this story.
A South Suburban mayor up for re-election next week is feeling the heat from her residents and questions from our news team.
We spent months trying to get a simple answer about her salary. CBS News Chicago's Lauren Victory goes on the hunt for answers.
Mayor's salaries, South Suburban Illinois. It just sounds so familiar. But I got an interesting take on this one. Of course, I got to take periodic pauses for YouTube. But y'all let me know if y'all heard this. This was sent to me just yesterday.
Morning, Mayor Curry. I'm great.
This interaction is months in the making. CBS News Chicago heard from residents that Linwood Mayor Jada Curry is taking home nearly triple the amount that's in the budget. Our calls and emails asking for an explanation didn't get us too far. So we took a trip to the South Suburb.
Can we talk to you about some questions circulating about your salary?
Sent over a statement to you all.
A statement that led to even more questions about how taxpayer money is being spent in Linwood. More on that after some quick history.
All right, now take a look at what the salary for the mayor was, what it got changed to. This is something we saw before with Tiffany Henyard and the salary with one of her positions, and how this mayor is earning almost 3 times what her salary should be. Now, we'll have some discussions on, Is it wrong? Probably the answer is yes. But I have a little bit of empathy for this mayor, only with regard to this particular issue.
In 2021, Jada Curry ran for village president, aka mayor. Well before the election, this ordinance drastically reduced the salary of its next to be determined mayor. $85,000 a year dropped to $20,000. We know Curry knew about the pay cut because she was a trustee, and her vote is recorded right here, opposing the 20 grand salary.
You just made $93,000.
Now fast forward to 2025.
Do you have an explanation for that? I'll take your question and follow up with you. Thank you.
Curry.
Okay, now we got to be honest here. To drop the salary from $83,000 to $20,000, I mean, I'm just going to say it sounded a little low. I'm assuming it's a part-time type of mayoral position, but big ass drop sounds a little low, just off the cuff. Initial impressions.
Is running for a second term. Her first mayoral campaign on a platform of transparency.
Transparency. Is that what you call ignoring public records requests? CBS News Chicago had to get the Illinois Attorney General involved to compel Linwood to comply with the law. It took the village nearly 2 months to hand over Mayor Curry's payroll records.
Here's what we finally learned. Curry brought home almost $100,000 in 2024.
All right, that's a big difference from $25,000. Now, how she got there is interesting, and I'm not actually too upset with the salary. Just how she got the extra funds is probably the thing that's more problematic for me.
She's currently paid to be village president, 20 grand, cannabis commissioner, 5 grand, liquor commissioner, 10 grand, $35,000 in the budget. So where'd the extra cash, more than $60K, come from?
What do you say to people that are confused about what you're being paid?
I've given you your written response.
That written response mentioned earlier does account for the additional money. She's paid for meetings, we were told. It's right there on Curry's pay stub, $2,500 every 2 weeks. Wait, a mayor?
So this mayor is paid essentially $5,000 a month to attend meetings. Now, this is the question. Why, DFD, what meetings are those we're talking about? Are these like some out-of-pocket meetings? Are you talking about the mandatory meetings you need to do because you're the mayor that every mayor would have to go through, go and attend?
$100 every 2 weeks. Wait, a mayor paid for meetings?
Well, who's making the decision about these kind of perks of the office that you get paid for extra work that is, in fact, part of the job description?
David Greising spoke to us in general about public official salaries. He heads up the watchdog group, Better Government Association.
Typically, the mayor doesn't have the right to raise their own salary.
Would you like to sit down for a formal interview?
Curry literally closed the door on the opportunity to explain where in the budget it says she's supposed to be paid $65,000 a year to go to meetings. Her representative later sent us the previous mayor's pay stub to show he too was compensated for meetings.
Now, she gets $5,000 a month to attend meetings. This was year to date. So this is at the end of the year, his $93,000 salary. The previous mayor got $900 for the entire year as a meetings fee, whereas she gets $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year for a meeting fee.
Yes, there it is. A whopping $900, not 65 G's. Lauren Victory, CBS News, Chicago.
Curry's representative tells us her meeting pay is part of a $372,000 allocation labeled administrative salaries. At least one trustee who voted on that same budget tells us she's never heard of meeting pay.
I don't know. I thought that was an interesting story because it's along the lines of what we've been talking about. Somebody in power trying to take advantage of the system. I actually looked because they had a follow-up to that story. The meetings that she's paying herself $5,000 a month to attend are the meetings that she is supposed to attend out of her normal duties as the mayor. Now, you might ask, why in the hell is there a meeting fee in the first place? Well, it's actually interesting. The meeting fee, what it is, how it's supposed to be used is if you have an employee who has a 9 to 5 government job, but the mayor has to attend a trustee meeting, a council meeting that occurs at 7 o'clock, 7:30, let's say. Well, those funds, the mayor may say, hey, I need my staff to attend, or other 9 to 5 government employees to attend this meeting that's occurring past your normal work hours. So those funds are actually meant to pay government employees to attend those meetings if they're helping the mayor or other elected or appointed officials. It's not to line the mayor's pockets to attend meetings that she has to attend by statute to perform her official functions. But again, it's all a part of what we've been seeing going on. And, statistically, Illinois has the most politicians who've been prosecuted for fraud of any state in the United States. So I thought that was an interesting story. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Hey, Brilliant dropped the first comment before the live stream even started. No, he can't help them. That's interesting. Maddie, I see you. Barbara, I appreciate you tuning in. Pretty Eyes, what's going on? I hope you're okay. Now let's dive into it. Okay. Now the title is, Can Beau Brindley Effectively Help Tiffany Henyard and Kamal Woods? Now there's 2 parts of looking at this. One part we're not going to consider, because I'm just going to be honest, without the indictment, not even without the indictment. Well, without the indictment, or just looking at it from the facts we have, it's actually hard for me to think of a viable, legitimate defense. So can an attorney represent them effectively? One part is from the defense side of the game. I'm just going to be honest. There's always an argument you can make, but there's not always a good argument you can make. The other part is no, when I say, can they effectively represent them? Can you represent 2 people who we can clearly see from the last subpoena that was issued, both persons are being looked at by the federal government? So I thought this was an interesting thing to look at, because we're going to talk about briefly conflict. And we talked about this before with regard to some attorneys representing the village, and it was just loosey-goosey. We didn't know who was representing who. But this one is unique because we know that these are criminal investigations. And there's speculation. I wasn't able to confirm this, but there's speculation out there that Beau Brindley is actually representing both Tiffany Henyard and Kamal Woods. So the questions is, 1, can he do this? If it can be done, can it be done effectively? If you have to cut one of the clients, as an attorney, which client do I think he would cut, and who would I cut? And ultimately, which client, if he is representing both of these persons, would actually be in a better position to leverage their information with federal prosecutors? So let's go ahead and cue it up. We always got to take a look at just what the statute is first, so we can know what's going on. Let me go ahead and get this queued up for y'all. All right. Here we are looking at the Illinois rules of professional conduct. Every state has rules of professional conduct. There's model American Bar Association rules that generally covers or are recommended for every state. Most states, they model their rules after the national ABA model rules. The same way the state governments model their criminal statutes after the federal government statutes. So here we're looking at Rule 1.7, Rule 1.7, conflict of interest with current clients. And we're moving here under the assumption that Beau Brindley is, in fact, representing Tiffany Henyard and Kamal Woods, who both were named as persons of interest in the latest federal subpoena that was served post the mayoral election for the village of Dalton. All right. They always started out written stupidly, but except as provided in paragraph B, a lawyer shall not represent a client if the representation involves concurrent conflicts of interest. A concurrent conflict of interest exists if, 1, the representation of one client will be directly adverse to another client, or there is significant risk that the representation of one or more clients will be materially limited by the lawyer's responsibilities to another client, a former client, or a third person, or a person of, or a personal interest of the lawyer. Here, I actually think both of these two things are satisfied. So typically, an attorney cannot represent two clients if there's a concurrent conflict. The representation of one client will be directly adverse to another client. Yes, that's clearly plausible here, because I'm not saying nobody should snitch, but if they're looking at the land deal, just a hypothetical. Well, this is a fact. We know they're looking at the land deal. We know the land deal, Kamal Woods was the person who owned the actual property. They're looking into that transaction and also potentially Tiffany Henyard's involvement. So, would the representation of one client be directly adverse to another? Yes. You know that's the case. If one person can do this and point to the other one, that means your clients have an adverse interest. Kamal Woods could potentially look out for his own best interest, and if it's in his best interest to point the finger at Tiffany Henyard, that's what he would do. Vice versa could also be true. So an attorney can't represent concurrent clients if that's present. That is present. And we only need one or the other. I think we actually have both in this case. So yes, it appears that Henyard and Kamal Woods, for purposes of an investigation by the feds into the land deal, their interests would be directly adverse to each other, or significant risk that the representation of one or more clients will be materially limited by the lawyer's responsibility. If one person wants to go in and take a deal and offer up information to the government in exchange for leniency, that satisfies prong number 2 as well. There is significant risk that the representation of one or more clients will materially be limited by the lawyer's responsibilities to another. I can't represent Tiffany Henyard effectively if at the same time I'm trying to represent Kamal Woods. And the thing that is in his best interest would be to leverage your knowledge and what information you had to the government for a lenient plea. Once I tell him to do that, there's no way I can pivot over and say, okay, now what you need to do, Tiffany, is like, no, it wouldn't work. So an attorney can't represent concurrent clients if one of these two things are present. Here, if Beau Brindley is representing both of those things would be present. Now, as with everything that we talk about when we look to a statute, there's always an exception to get around the general rule. General rule is you can't do it because the person's interests are adverse or the attorney doesn't have the ability to effectively represent both people. However, notwithstanding the existence of a concurrent conflict, all they had to do was say, however, even if one of the above prongs that would bar an attorney from representing an individual is met, a conflict of interest under paragraph A, which was the previous stuff we read, a lawyer may represent a client if, one, the lawyer reasonably believes that the lawyer will be able to provide competent and diligent representation to each affected client. I don't see how he can think that. Like, if he is representing both of those persons with what we've seen from that subpoena and what they're looking at, there's no way he could feel confident about being able to effectively represent both clients, because somebody's going to end up getting screwed over. Somebody's going to end up with the short end of the stick. And my whole job is to make sure my client doesn't end up with the short end of the stick. If I'm representing both of you and you get a good deal, you get a trash deal, I probably failed at least one of those persons. So an attorney can represent clients with conflicting interests if the lawyer believes they can do it effectively, which I don't think is the case, but he may be, a little egotistical and think he's that nice. If the representation is not prohibited by law, there are some representations that are expressly prohibited by law. Very rare in those situations. Or if the representation, Okay. And the other reason why you can represent the client if Lawyer believes they can do it. It's not prohibited by law, and the representation does not involve an assertion of a claim by one client against another. Long story short, what that is saying is, okay, you shouldn't represent two people who have conflicting interests. But if they agree to it, if it's not prohibited by law, if you think you can do it, and if they aren't directly adversarial parties. So if it's not plaintiff and defendant, you can't represent the plaintiff and defendant, but you could represent two defendants. That's essentially what that means. You can't represent two persons if they're adversarial parties, plaintiff and defendant. But in this case, they would be considered two defendants, so you can. So you have to have those things met. Lawyer has to believe they can represent each client effectively. It's not expressly prohibited by law, and the representation does not involve a claim that puts one client directly adverse to the other. One can't be the plaintiff, one can't be the defendant, and each affected client has to give their informed consent. They actually would have to sign a waiver saying that, hey, I'm aware of the conflict. I'm aware that our interests could conflict, but you're so nice. I don't know why anyone would say that. I'm not that good. You're so nice. You can represent both of our interests, even though they conflict with one another. And we're going to sign this paper saying that we authorize you to do that. Now, the reason for the signature is important. The reason for the signature is what would inevitably happen if they didn't sign an informed consent saying that we're aware of this issue, but we still want Mr. Brindley in our example to still represent me. What would ultimately happen is once one person gets the sweet deal and the other person is thrown in the clink for a year or so, they're probably going to file a complaint with the bar. So the informed consent that they have to sign is actually a protective measure, so the client can't come back and say, you never told me about this conflict. Had I known about it, I wouldn't have done it because you can't represent both of us. They said, nah, bro, we told you about it. You signed this. So it can't be done. It shouldn't be done. It can't be done. It would probably behoove them to each have their own attorney is probably the best method going forward. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, okay, in this situation, who is making the withdrawal? Is it the client making the withdrawal? Is the attorney backing out? Well, long story short, the client is the person who's probably going to make the withdrawal. So at some point, if Brindley is representing both Henyard and Kamal Woods, and they've already signed an informed consent, they are going to have to be the one to terminate that attorney-client relationship. Now, if I were an attorney, I'm representing each of these persons as it relates to this particular investigation over the land transaction. Who would I prefer to represent? Now, this is very important, and this is Lawyering 101. The person that you represent is the person who has the most sound, viable, consistent method to assert the best form of payment. Yeah, I thought I was going to say legal argument. We don't give a damn about the legal argument. If it's me, I'm representing both clients, and then I realize, oh, this isn't going to work out. I got to get rid of one of you. I don't give a damn about well, it's twofold. You could say, I'm going to represent the person with the best legal position, but the person with the best legal position may not be the person who can actually afford your services. So as an attorney, for me personally, I would err on the side of, hey, I'm going to represent the person who actually has the ability to make sure that my retainer is always full so I can continue to work on the case. Now, that could be interesting because there's a caveat to that. If one person is a high priority client, they're a popular client, and if you actually have a valid, viable legal argument, which I'm just going to be honest, I'd be shocked if there is one. But if I'm representing two clients, one client is more known in the public sphere than the other client. And even though that client who is more known may not have the ability to pay, if I actually have a very good defense for their case, that's the situation where the attorney may say, hey, that client might be a little broke ass, or might not have the ends to pay your boy, but because they're a high profile client, because I actually have a good legal argument and I think I can beat these charges, this representation will be worth more to me in the long run than whatever client B could pay me who may not have as strong of a case. But typically in those situations, the clients are the ones who come to the conclusion that this isn't our best interest. Now, why would clients ever want one attorney to represent both of them? I can just tell you what I normally see, because I can't think of one reason why I would ever want it done. Like if me and Mama DFD were both charged with crimes, I'd be like, hey, Ma, I love you, but you got to find your own lawyer because it's just not going to work. But why would a client, or why, in examples that I have seen where clients have agreed, even though their interests are counter to one another or could be counter to one another, why did they elect to be represented by one attorney? The only situations I've seen it happen is because of the money. And it's normally a relationship. It's normally couples who aren't married who do this stupid shit. I've never seen, because a married couple, think about it. If Tiffany Henyard and Kamal Woods were actually married, they actually have a little bit of leverage because there's some spousal privilege that they could assert where they can't be compelled to testify against the other one. So in every scenario I've seen, it's always a scenario like this. It's normally there's a couple, this couple isn't married, so they don't have any spousal privilege. Normally in those situations, one is what I would call the primary breadwinner, and they're like, come on, boo, I'm gonna make sure we both taken care of. And 100% of the time, I've seen it maybe, I would say 5 to 7 times, somewhere 5, 6, 7 times I've seen this happen. Every time that relationship with the the relationships that the parties have and the relationships that they all have with the attorney come to a screeching halt. So I don't think that this one would be different if, in fact, Beau Brindley is actually representing both Kamal Woods and Tiffany Henyard in any form of federal criminal investigation. Now, the final thing that we're going to talk about is who would be in a. Oh, let me see. I just want to check out some of these comments real quick. They all deserve each other. Yeah, there's going to be a bunch of people who, yeah, that's a relationship with a lot of that relationship of attorney representing. If they're all representing each other and that legal menage, it's going to end in disaster. It's going to end in disaster. Let's see. Is it possible that another representative from the Brindley law firm will take on the case? That's actually a very good question. Shout out to you, AP. I appreciate you for dropping that question. Now, typically conflicts as they actually, let me pull it up. Typically, the general rule is that conflicts of one attorney in a firm represent that entire firm. So if I'm heading up DFD and Associates and I have a conflict with a client that I want to represent, I got a conflict of interest. Normally that conflict spreads to the entire firm, but again, there's always an exception. Let me go ahead and pull it up so I can get you the exact language. I need to re-angle this. Let's see. We're going to go there. Let's see. Rule 1.10. Let's see. Illinois Rule 1.10. Give me 1 second. 1.10. All right. Let's see. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at it since I got it up on the screen. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. All right. While lawyers are associated in the firm, none of them shall knowingly represent a client when any one of them practicing alone would be prohibited for doing so by rules 1.7 or 1.9. And 1.7 were the rule we read previously. Unless the prohibition is based on a personal interest of the prohibited lawyer and does not present a significant risk of materially limiting the representation of the client by the remaining lawyers. So, long story short, generally the conflict spreads to everyone in the firm unless the reason the attorney is conflicted is because of a personal interest. Okay, my cousin is charged with some fraudulent situation. I'm like, yo, I will represent you. Well, I wouldn't say cousin because that is a little bit easier, I think. Let's say, like, hey, yeah. Oh, I know a perfect example. The real life case I had. Your grandmother or your mother is trying to help out her friend, and her friend like, oh man, I'm sure I'm in paid, Gertrude, and your grandmother's like, oh, don't worry about it. Here, you can take some of my oxycodone pills. Here, just take a couple of them till you get your prescription renewed. No harm, no foul. And she give her the pills, and I don't know. The lady who need the pills, something is going on with her insurance. She's not getting them, so grandma dropping them oxycodone pills off. Here you go. Here, 2 a day is all you need, or 1 a day. If she giving them, grandma's so nice because she feeling better. She don't need her oxycodone. She's just sharing with her friend. You won't believe this? What happened? Granny ass got charged with trafficking. that was a real life case I had. I was like, wait, what? She was doing what? Granny ass got charged with trafficking. So let's say Granny, that's my grandmother. She comes to me like, hey, I got charged with trafficking. I was just trying to help my friend. That's what this situation is talking about. That's my grandmother. I'm conflicted out because I have a personal interest. It doesn't always have to be adversarial legal proceedings or arguments that could cause the conflict. You could be conflicted because of personal interest. And I'm just be honest, my grandmother would be because I could probably represent a cousin or something like that. An immediate family member, a grandparent, I'm going to be too emotionally involved. I'm gonna be like, no, you don't understand, Your Honor. That's my grandma. She used to change my like, no, I'm going to be too emotionally involved. But this says the conflict doesn't spill over to the entire firm, and the firm can represent if the conflict is one of personal interest and only by the prohibited lawyer. That would be the scenario I'm talking about. Like, hey, I can't represent you, grandma, because we got a personal interest, but somebody in my firm probably will be able to handle it. Now, I'd be in their office every day like, yo, you get my Meemaw squared away. She's not a trafficker, man. But that's what that situation is saying. All right, when the lawyer has terminated an association with the firm is not prohibited from thereafter representing a person with interests materially adverse to those of a client represented by the formerly associated lawyer and not currently represented by the firm. Okay, that subsection B is talking about, subsection A is saying, hey, it spreads to the firm unless the conflict is just a personal relationship. Then someone else can do it. You can wall off the conflicted party. Like, hey, don't go in there, DFD, and keep asking this guy about what's going on with your granny's case. You can wall me off. B is the situation we talked about before when we went through Rule 1.7, where it talked about conflicting parties, plaintiff versus defendant, or two defendants whose position could be negative, could negatively impact the other. So this is just a scenario where, hey, I got a conflict. One attorney actually leaves the firm. He like, yo, I got a conflict that's just terrible. I can't do this representation because you can't represent them in this case because I actually won a lawsuit against that client that you want to represent over the same issue. That's a conflict. This is a situation when a lawyer has terminated an association with the firm. I don't want y'all to be conflicted out, so y'all give me my golden parachute. I'm going to leave so y'all can represent this big client who I already sued for a hit and run or something like that. But that's essentially the rules. Any lawyer remaining at the firm has information protected by Rule 1.6, blah, 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 the disqualifications. But yeah, generally the conflict spreads to the lawyers of the firm, but there's always exceptions to everything. Protect their lives. Yeah, it is. I don't know if I'm sure he's billing them both, but I've never seen that. The only situations I've seen where there's a representation with two conflicted clients is always a relationship of a non-married couple. One person is normally the primary breadwinner. And in each of those situations, I remember literally they all ended up having to get their own counsel. I would just never do it because I wouldn't put myself in a position where I'm inherently by default is going to harm one client by helping another one. I'm not going to put myself in that position. Didn't their relationship come into play with the Detroit mayor? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it did. Kwame Kilpatrick had a lot going on, including buying a mansion after he got out of custody. But that's neither here nor there. Let's see. I don't know, man. Like, Better Call Saul wasn't actually the worst attorney. Like, I'm not saying he didn't make the best decisions, but I mean, probably 80% of the things he did were like illegal and definitely unethical. But he had contacts. Now it's all good. The chosen one, no worries. Let's see. What's going on, E. Todd? I appreciate you tuning in. Oh, he was. Oh, I remember her. She was wasn't she like the Real Housewife scammer or something like that? I think Pocket Watcher did a video on that. Beau was a British Williams lawyer and didn't tell her she had to self-surrender apparently. And the marshal. That's crazy. That's crazy. I don't know. That's serious. That's crazy. That's the one thing you gotta let your client know. Like, hey, you gotta go turn yourself in, or they gonna come get you. He's a petty ambulance chaser. Yeah, no attorney worth their salt. No attorney who actually isn't like an attorney grifter would ever represent two people who have conflicting interests. Because you're not gonna put yourself in a position where, like, yo, I'm gonna lose for one of these people, and I'm gonna lose badly because I have to in order to take care of the other person. The township should not be responsible for people charged in their individual capacity. Just because you are the mayor, if you do something goofy, like if the mayor was doing something within the scope of the, like, I don't know, let's say hypothetically the mayor was sued because the mayor was operating a minivan to get the seniors to Big Bingo, which was canceled, which was crazy work. But she wanted to get the seniors to Big Bingo, got involved in a car accident, and it was her fault. Something like that. This government would probably flip the bill, because when they look at everything, they'll say everything was official capacity. But for something like this, criminal charges, they not flipping the township is not going to flip the bill. The village is, no government entity is going to flip the bill for a crime. Now, could money be finessed to pay for your attorneys out of something associated with a municipality? That could happen, but nah. You sued in your individual capacity for a crime, you eat the cost. Yeah, that's going. Hey, yo, MDJ, it always happens. Like, literally, been doing this over 15 years, y'all. Only two people. I mean, stood on business. When I mean stood on business, like, everybody take a plea agreement. Like, oh, I'm not snitching, but I'll take a plea agreement just so you don't have to go through the process of doing a trial and getting a jury and all of the extra work. Most people take plea agreements. No, only two people I know for sure was like, nah, I'm not talking, and I'm not taking no plea agreement. I plead guilty, but I ain't taking no agreement from the DA. I'm gonna leave it up to the judge. And I was like, that's probably not a good thing. The judge is gonna screw you over, probably worse. But there are only two people in a 15-year career with thousands of defendants and thousands of clients, thousands of defendants, thousands of plaintiffs going through. I've only seen two people who were like, I'm not actually, yeah. They better call. Oh man, that's what I would rather have. Okay, if y'all had to get one attorney, you hey, shout out Kathy. This is a good question. You are on trial for a double homicide, right? You can't represent yourself and you can't call anyone else. You either have to pick Max Solomon or Beau Brindley. Those are your only two options. Your other options is you don't got any other options. If you say I don't want either one of them, you are just immediately snapped out of the universe, no longer to be in existence. So you don't have, your only option is you can go with A, Max Solomon, or B, Beau Brindley. Who are y'all taking? I'm gonna put that up as a poll question. Yeah, they wouldn't cover for that anyway. Let's see. Very dope question. I agree. No, I can't. I wouldn't take client. I don't care how much you could afford the retainer and keep replenishing that retainer so I could work on your case in this complex. I would represent a client who had money troubles before I represented a client who don't listen. Because I just don't see any way. I mean, maybe their attorneys advise them to go into the public, but I don't see nothing of value comes from anyone talking. When we did the video, when we looked at Big U's indictment, literally he was going to turn himself in and decided to live stream. He admitted to PPP. He implicated himself in at least 2 crimes, probably more, but at least 2 crimes just from going live to turn himself in as he thought he was defending himself. And they both were related to PPP loans. We never defrauded anything. We only took out 2 PP loans. Now you just said that, so there's no way. I would rather deal with someone who is having fiscal problems, because I can deal with that. Like, at least they listen. You're not damaging your case. You're not damaging my ability to represent you. I'm almost done, okay? Relax. I'm almost done. We're going to go play fetch. I agree. I would stop. I'll be done in a minute. Go sit down. I agree with you, though. I would say, I don't know if Max may not even show up to court. Yeah, you have good judgment and smart. But yeah, that's I think. Oh, last question. Clearly, this is the easiest one of all the ones we introduced this live stream with. Kamal Woods is in the best position to leverage his knowledge. If we're talking about an investigation solely regarding the property transaction, why is he the best person to get the sweetest deal to leverage his knowledge? If there's anything illegal going on with that transaction and Tiffany Henyard is involved, we talk about this all the time. You want to go for what's a big fish, and a mayor, a township supervisor who's, hey, if I were at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I just got appointed under a new Republican regime. Hey, nothing to look more good to stop fraud, waste, and abuse by tossing a Democratic mayor in the clink for doing something shady. So Kamal has the most leverage and is in the best position to negotiate something with the feds, just only as it relates to that property transaction, if that's the crime that they're focusing on. And that's just because of who Tiffany Henyard is. There are 50 gazillion Kamal Woods out there who is just some guy who's doing a random fraud. But a mayor, the more I guess letters you have behind your name, the more accolades. It would be like if I'm a prosecutor, like the prosecutor we talked about in Jackson. If I'm a prosecutor and I'm working on the side with people who are trafficking drugs, drug traffickers are bad, but a prosecutor who's facilitating transaction with drug traffickers is much more worse. And that's something that people run for the U.S. Senate on. So he's definitely in a much better position. That's funny. Exactly. One person is a whale, the other person is a minnow. It's gonna be a matter. I don't know. They're gonna start pointing. It's just inevitable. Yeah, a lawyer that's considered taking on both. Is it though? Isn't that? I don't know. I don't know what. Even if that's the case, like I said, a client could be enough of, like, would I represent DC council member Trayon White, who's charged with bribery? Yeah, I would probably represent him, even though the facts are terrible. The video footage, the audio, it's probably some of the worst evidence I've seen in a bribery case. Probably some of the worst evidence I've seen in a bribery case. But he hasn't talked about it since he was arrested. He said, hey, he hasn't talked about it since he's been ousted from the city council. He hasn't talked about it. So even if it's a bad case, a popular case could be favorable to an attorney. But a popular case that's not winnable with the bad client who's always going to talk to the public and say things that's probably counter to her interest, nah, I can't deal with that. But yo, that's it to this video. The preview video I showed in the beginning, if y'all haven't seen it, I'll pin it to the comment once I get off of this. I'll pin it in the first comment to this video. That was the craziest story I've seen. And the more I look into it, I feel so terrible for that lady who married this guy who was serving 4 life sentences. Because by all accounts, she seemed like everybody speaks glowingly of her. She seemed very positive. So I'm going to link that video to this video in the pinned comments. Y'all should go check it out. That was an interesting live stream. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Yo, y'all have a good one. Y'all be safe. I'm trying to think. Friday, I may have to move that to Saturday. I don't know yet, but I'll let y'all know. Y'all take care. Be blessed. I appreciate all y'all. Thank you for y'all support. Be easy. Peace.